Hello everyone. So, there's no one there, but I'll do this review anyway. Last time I did one, I had said that I don't really enjoy very much that's coming out lately in cinema, but something's come out and I felt like, why don't I review it, because I enjoyed this one. Dunkirk is the 10th full-length feature directed by Christopher Nolan. It's also his 7th release through Warner Brothers Pictures, which should tell you that, like Clint Eastwood, he's quite comfortable with the creative leeway that they afford him there. This film was made with a similar budget to that of Interstellar, which was about $150 million, and like every Nolan film so far, it's probably going to make its money back and then some. So the story of this movie is based on a military disaster that happened in France in the early phase of World War II. 400,000 British and French soldiers were stranded on a strip of beach and were being picked off at will by German opposition. With that in mind, you can imagine the set pieces are fairly grandiose and focus heavily on casualties of war, but on a very, very large scale. And if you can imagine the shots from Gone with the Wind, where Scarlett is surveying the battle scene during the Civil War, or shots from movies like Atonement, or even the opening scene from Saving Private Ryan at the Battle of Normandy, you can get an idea of what Nolan is bringing to the table for this project. The set pieces that he'd gotten so masterful with in Inception, in Interstellar, and the Dark Knight trilogy are given a war theme and look much bigger than any of those films. But it's in the nuances that he brings, like when people run along a pier and they have an endless stream of rifles left by themselves, or the thousands of helmets that are just by themselves on a beach. It's also in the pathos of quiet scenes, shots like when a lone soldier walks into the English Channel and he's planning on swimming back home, which is most likely suicide, or thousands of soldiers scurrying out of the way of bombs being dropped on them, and once the coast is clear, resuming their spots on extraction waiting lines. The driving force for this movie, as in the way the movie gets from beginning to end, is done with 3 intertwining story arcs. You've got the soldiers on the land trying to leave in whatever way they can, even if it breaks convention of what would be perceived as cowardice. Then you've got the pilots in the air that are doing the best they can to minimize the loss of boats by fighting off the German air forces. And finally you've got the civilian boats that were requisitioned after Winston Churchill released order for any able-bodied boat owners to sail in and collect as many survivors as possible. In the end, the evacuation was considered a success because it saved around 350,000 lives. That's not a spoiler, and realistically I would say that most war movies are not very spoiler-filled, which is why they might be not as accepted as fanfare as a movie like The Dark Knight is. There's no air of suspense or cliffhanger because the events are already unfolded and are not open to reinterpretations. But I also think one of the biggest subtexts I picked up on is the subject of first impressions and misconceptions. A lot of movies by Nolan, you walk out and are thinking about the hidden meanings and double entendres, sometimes for weeks. I feel like this movie was commenting on the narrative of Britain's part in the war effort at the time, but it's also commenting on the delivery of story in general. It's a mature look at concepts like heroism and cowardice, duty and self-preservation, and most importantly, how the delivery of information about all these concepts can affect the ways a situation or a person is viewed. The way Christopher Nolan tells a story about the way a story was told in light of what actually happened was very intelligent. It was like Inception but applied to storytelling. He also brings out old tropes like timeline manipulation for Dunkirk, but it isn't for the fuck of it, because I don't think the way you see the characters at one point of the movie compared to another would be as effective if it was a linear structure. It would still be a good movie because there's so many details that worked and would mean it is still a good movie. But I think the timeline being jumbled not only imparts an immersion into the disorientation of a soldier, it also gives a lot of poignancy to the character arcs. Hans Zimmer's score is evocative and tense. The use of seconds on a clock as a rhythmic cue throughout the movie, and the violin pitchings through tones, semitones, and quarter tones brought so much suspense to the visuals. At times in Interstellar, I felt like Zimmer was given too much free rein, but in this one, they used the music perfectly throughout. I think it's a very balanced film and really enjoyed that about it. I would say as a disclaimer, I'm not a huge fan of war films, but when a movie is done as well as this, I look beyond genre and enjoy it for the quality. I didn't really talk about characters because I don't think this movie is a study of character as much as it is a study of the multifaceted nature of humanity and the effects of war. But I would say that the characters in this movie were played magnificently. I think Harry Styles, I've only known of him from One Direction fame. He was amazing in this movie, as well as the more contemporary actors that were played around him, the really young cast. They were all really good in this movie. Kenneth Branagh as a stone-faced, high-ranking officer that was trying to get rid of everyone, trying to get them back to safety across the channel, back to Britain. He was great. Tom Hardy as the fighter pilot, he was great, and an example of what I was saying before, where you have a perception about a character in the beginning and it changes throughout the movie. He had that kind of thing happen to him. So did Cillian Murphy, and so did Mark Rylance's character, who is the boat owner, who in the beginning you feel is just a common person, but later on there's just backstory, and the impressions that you get of people in the beginning are very different from the way that you see them at the end. And as I said before, I think the timeline manipulation Nolan used in this movie really brought that to the forefront. So I didn't give my rating for this movie, actually. I think that it was, for what it is, a war film, and the way that it's been told, I think that this is a 9 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10 just because this isn't my beloved genre, and I don't really subscribe to any genre, but yeah, I think that this is a 9 out of 10, so I don't know what held it back, but it's a great movie, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone that wants to go to the films and likes mature filmmaking. So yeah, that's what I had to say about this movie. Would I watch it again? Yes. If you have any ideas about war films or Christopher Nolan movies, or what is his best movie, what is his worst movie, you're more than welcome to comment. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. There's a lot of people out there that haven't, so yeah. I'll see you next time. Bye.